Nathalie Simper, and this is The Limitless Musician, a podcast by KE Creative. Our team helps modern musicians find modern solutions to building a sustainable music career. Along with my co-host, Dr. Katherine Emeneth, we will help you learn what it takes to build a career that enhances your life instead of restricting it by becoming the limitless musician you are meant to be. Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast. You have me, your co-host Nathalie, and today we have our other co-host Katherine. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm great. Happy to be here.
Yay! We also have Teef in the studio. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see like most of him chilling on the couch. And today we're just going to be talking about creativity as musicians. And I feel like that seems kind of like an obvious conversation because as musicians, we're creative all the time. But especially this year, I've kind of been focusing on how I'm creative in other areas of my life. And I've actually found that it has made me more inspired and motivated and driven as a musician in my own career. So I felt like, just continuing off of the discussions on previous episodes this season about being yourself and making sure that you are prioritizing yourself in everything that you do, I think this would be a great topic for us to both cover and share some insight on, because I don't know, you're one of the most creative people I know. So who better to have this conversation with, right?
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, I think it's good. And especially it's timely because we're approaching the end of the year. So, as the new year starts, it's a good time to reflect about, life and make new plans or new goals personally, professionally for the next year. So, yeah, it's a very timely topic.
Mm-hmm. Especially because, we're approaching gig season, which, is typically a hectic time for musicians, regardless of how many gigs that you have. Like, it's just always busy for people. And, after having a year full of ups and downs and everything that you've experienced, it's easy to feel like uninspired or kind of just like, you're going through the motions of, well, like, this is my career. I have to show up for the things that I committed to several months in advance. And we're here, but we're a little low energy. And, it's just kind of like, you don't really feel that passion of like, I get to be a musician every day. I get to show up and do all the things. So have you ever felt like that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I find that happens when I am barely keeping my head above water with things. When my schedule is so tightly packed that I can only think about the next thing on the calendar and not have time to either get over one big project and to move on to the next. So being excited about a new project or a new gig or something doesn't happen when I'm just trying to just keep my head above water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that burnout is like, it becomes like this blanket over everything, right? So like when you're tired, when you're overbooked, when you're stressed, it's difficult to focus on the things that feel really important and also the things that make you feel fulfilled and excited to do all the stuff. I know for me, like, the same thing when I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's not like, oh, yay, I get to be a musician. It's like, okay, I've got to do this thing so that I can get it over with and then move on to the next thing. Because, sometimes you kind of feel like you're on this conveyor belt of like, all right, you work on this one thing, on to the next. And you don't really get to like sit and enjoy like the actual activity of creating music and feeling that connection that you get from it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, honestly, yesterday or the day before, I got the email for my first December gig that had all the music in it. And it was really, and I was like looking through the music and I was so excited because it's like Christmas and it's sight readable and it's low pressure and it's like getting to just sit and play, which as a teacher and, small business owner online, just being able to get to sit and play is a luxury. It doesn't happen super frequently for me anymore. So I am thrilled about that. It's going to be like my spa time.
Yay. Yeah, I have one of those gigs where it's like, you go through seasons where it's like I'm just going to say yes to everything and like, build up those gigs, build up those connections and have those experiences. And I've gotten to the point where I have this one holiday gig where I look forward to it every single year. I'm like, yes, like this is my gig season where I get to show up and just like you said, like enjoy being there, like enjoy the people that I'm sharing the stage with. And it's also really great music, which sometimes you really like what you're playing. Sometimes it's just like, all right, this is just another day in the office. So yeah, like find you those golden egg like
Hmm.
gigs that really keep that excitement going and don't leave you feeling like, okay, well, I'm just here because I've got to collect the check or because I've committed to this, I'm fulfilling a commitment. Rather, it can be like, yes, you're fulfilling a commitment, but also like you're enjoying what you're doing.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you get older and you're able to curate more of what you do versus what you don't do, it's easier to find more enjoyment in it instead of just the hustle and bustle of running from gig to gig. And I think the same thing with just organizing your life to include the things that you can that are more manageable. I think that all of us have to go through a phase where we overdo it, you know, and we maybe overdo it for a while until we're like, okay, we can't do this anymore. This is not fun. This is not what we want. And you have to find, you have to find the point where it's too much, and you also have to find the point where it's too little, and that sweet spot in between. And not every single season of life is going to be in the sweet spot. I mean, it's still going to be overwhelming sometimes, but just as long as that's not the norm, I feel like that allows you space to be creative in other ways and to get excited about the moments where you get to be creative as an artist.
Hmm. And I know at times it feels like, we know that being a classical musician is difficult. Like there are a lot of challenges and just things that we have to learn how to navigate just year to year and situation to situation so that we can feel like we're in a place where, we've kind of got our routine going. We know what we want, what we don't want, and we can kind of build the structure for the career that we're looking for and that really complements the lifestyle that you want to have outside of your career. But I know that there are certain times where I took gigs or took certain opportunities. And even though it was kind of a struggle or it was a little bit of a challenge, like in my mind, it was kind of worth it to like suffer for the
Hmm.
art of like, yeah, like I know that this is worth it because what I'm getting in return is valuable to me. And that can be different for everybody. But you can get to a point where it's like, all right, like, yes, it's challenging. Yes, it's fulfilling, but it doesn't really feel that worth it.
Yeah.
The moment of like, okay, I'm giving a lot. Am I getting what's valuable to me in return? So, and I think we see that with a lot of musicians, that experience burnout, that it's like, well, they just they go to from one thing to the next, performance to performance. And there's really no space to breathe and to reflect on what that means, just as being a human rather than, okay, I'm a person with a job and I've got to fulfill that job.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a tricky thing to navigate. And I think also for younger people, there's an immense amount of pressure to do take every single gig because it is a status symbol of showing how in demand you are, you know?
Mhm.
And there's this feeling of like, if you say no to a gig, you might not get it again. And yes, that is true. But also, if it's not a great gig, would you want to take it again anyway? So it's a balancing act, for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was, kind of looking reflecting at my own life, especially this year, because I've had, quite a few bit of personal challenges, and it's really, made me question my ability to show up and to be inspired, and to kind of be 100% as a private teacher, as a performer, as a podcaster, and everything that we do here at KE Creative. And, ironically, as I found myself trying to prioritize things outside of music, things that were really just more important to me rather than my identity as a musician, I actually found myself being able to show up more as myself, and also just more excited to show up as a musician, like instead of just being like, all right, like I made the schedule for myself, I have to follow through with it, and I just gotta get through the day. It was more like, oh, I actually want to go through my day, I actually want to kind of live in each moment of the things that I have going on as a musician, rather than I've just got to push through it so that I can, like, close up the studio, turn off the lights, and stare at the wall for the rest of the night, or just like doom scroll.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And how were you able to do that? How were you able to, take a step back and reflect and just be able to enjoy the moment instead of feeling like you just had to check it off?
Yeah, and in my experience, it was really just like I was prioritizing things that were necessary for me to just like exist from day to day. So it's like, all right, like I've got to like get sleep. All right, I have all this nervous energy. How do I get rid of it? Right. And one of the things that I've been really focusing on this year is just prioritizing my health. And, as a musician, that has been a constant struggle of balancing, how much time do I put into myself versus how much am I putting into practicing and doing all of the other things that are involved in my professional life. And so taking that time to think, okay, well, what do I need physically? What do I need mentally? What do I need emotionally? So some of those things that came up this year were walking with my dogs. We've got quite an exciting group of dogs in the house,
Mm-hmm.
with very unique personalities. And, Teeth sleeping on the couch over there looks very nice and calm, but is super energetic. And so, being able to think a little bit more thoroughly about how to structure his day so that he gets fulfillment and he gets exercise and gets ways to burn out that energy actually helped me like burn some of the nervous energy and the nervous thoughts that I was having to work through in my own mind. So it gave me time not only to bond with him, but to like think through things that I was working through on a professional level. Like, all right, I had this dilemma come up with a student. Like, how do I solve that? Or like, oh, I have this scheduling conflict, or we have this thing that I want to do, and what are my first steps to go through it? So it actually gave me the space to spin my creative wheels without the pressure of necessarily being on the clock and being like, okay, well, I have to deliver results. I have to be like the perfect musician right now. No, it was like, okay, I can think through these things and get through to dead ends. I could, take time to think these things through and come up with something that I could just implement in my professional life. And it became something that I looked forward to, rather than like, I'm doing this because like my dog needs this and because like I need this too. It became something that I was really looking forward to doing. That and baking and meal planning. I've been sharing all my meal prep stuff, and that's definitely been something that's gotten my creative juices flowing too.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And I think, a lot of times it feels like we're married to our craft. And yeah, we are. I mean, that is what we do, but it doesn't have to be all consuming, like you don't have to, and that's hard to do, it's hard to just be a person who happens to do music instead of be a musician who happens to be a person. So I think finding ways to allow yourself to be free and not always thinking about when's the next time I need to practice, when's the next time, what's the next thing on the to-do list for my career, but just knowing that you're working and you're doing the thing, and yeah, maybe keep looking towards the horizon of what's next, but not 30 things of what's next, but maybe 3 things of what's next. And then be able to enjoy the in between times when you're not working towards something or aggressively and you're just being you.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I see it a lot with, I have a couple cousins who also have creative careers. And like, I think it's just difficult for us to see music as something that's like therapeutic.
Mhm.
When it's something that we do day in and day out. And yeah, there are moments where like I look to music as something that is kind of a release or a fulfillment of some sort, like beyond being a musician. It's like, oh, I listen to my favorite artist, or I pull up my favorite playlist when I'm cleaning around the house and stuff. But, I don't really see it as like something that I can enjoy recreationally or passively,
Mhm.
which I think a lot of musicians feel that way. It's like, well, I do this day in and day out. Like, I don't necessarily
Right.
want to do this like in my, on my downtime. And, we see that like a time and time again that art, music, like a lot of creative outlets are used to help people heal and feed their brains, like not only from mental challenges, but also from like physical challenges. And I just think it's interesting that we don't always see that correlation when it
Mhm.
comes to musicianship.
Oh, for sure, because we're literally in it all day long. And I know when I go upstairs after a long day of teaching and my husband is playing music, I'm like, no, I can't. I need silence right now. And it drives him nuts because he loves music. He loves weird European German techno from the 90s stuff, but you do you. And I can't handle it because I feel like that we're always analyzing and critiquing and thinking and not always just enjoying it. I don't, and sometimes I think that that's almost taken away from us if we're not careful, if we have to be really careful about that because it's easy to just get so caught up in it that you literally don't want to listen, or you need a break from it. And I know for me, the way that I have to listen to music now is I have to listen to either jazz or some like random crazy pop music or like world pop music. Like there's this cool group that's like desert jazz basically from Africa, and it's just chill, and I'm not as familiar with world music structures and harmonies and the language even that they're singing, and so that's refreshing to me. That's how I'm able to enjoy music is through listening to really far off stuff off the beaten path. And plus I love world music anyway, so makes sense.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like my husband loves heavy metal music, and I'm like, I can't. It's like it's like a wall of sound like on my ears, and I'm like, I hear music all the time, and up close and personal, like with private teaching and stuff. And then when you're practicing, like you are in that music, and so it feels like you just need you need your space from it to process and kind of recover the way that your body needs sleep in order to recover and reset from the day that you just had. But yeah, it reminds me of those memes that you see of like people that are like, oh, just listen to classical music when you study. It'll be really relaxing. And then it shows like classical musicians that are just like so stressed and then can no longer focus.
Yeah.
And when I was looking through things of us to talk about today and just kind of doing my usual deep dive, I didn't know this, but I found out that in ancient Greece and Rome, that like artistic activities like art and music and like sculpting and stuff were actually prescribed for people with depression or anxiety, like as a way to be enriching and as a release from all of the things that they were experiencing. I was like, well, like why don't we do that? Why don't we have doctors prescribe like art classes or something?
Uh-huh. Oh, that'd be so fun. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
totally. Yeah, and I think I and that's exactly right, because like in a lot of different types of therapies, there literally is art therapy. There
Mm-hmm.
literally is music therapy. And I know a lot of people who will just get together for like knitting circles or quilting groups and stuff. And it's just something, and these days too, with everything being digital, you don't often see the result of your effort. And so whenever you are creating something physically, it can be very satisfying. I know when last year, when I was making my daughter's Christmas stocking, I used one of those little kits, felt kits that my family has used for generations, and it's all the same and whatever. And I had never really done anything that intense before, but it was so relieving to just sit there and like create something cool and learn how to do it and learn how to do a new skill. And that was super fun. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think that there's some comfort in, I don't know, I guess I'll call it like routine creativity, where we're creating on smaller scales and not for something as great a purpose as making an income and like sustaining our lifestyles. That it doesn't seem as important or as effective because it is so small a scale.
Mhm.
But I think that we can find a benefit in striking that balance of routine creativity to help keep those creative channels in our brain active, but not necessarily on going full speed 100% day in day out all the time.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, there was this study that I was looking at. It was a study of healthcare professionals over the span of a couple of years. So it was like 2020 to 2023. And the study basically took a pool of healthcare care workers and who had experienced anxiety, depression, burnout, PTSD, and were just like overall just very dissatisfied in the workplace and with their jobs in general. And they gave them different like creative arts therapy interventions over the course of a couple months. And then their stress and all of that stuff was like evaluated at the beginning of the study, during the study, after the study, and then they did a follow up like 3 years later to see how these people were doing and if they were experiencing the same levels of anxiety and depression and so on. And it said that their levels of stress and other levels of dissatisfaction in their work were between 12 and 28% less than before they started doing the creative arts therapy. And, 3 years later, a lot of them had said that they did not want to leave their job, that they felt more satisfied in the workplace and with their career in general, and that a lot of them had continued with the activity that they were assigned in the study. And I just think it's interesting that, in a world that kind of prioritizes practical jobs, like become a lawyer, become a doctor, those kinds of, what seem like more financially reliable choices, that it's involvement in those creative fields and those creative activities that actually saves you more time and more money and more grief and stress in the long run, because it gives you a way to work out the frustrations, the negativity, the challenges that you're experiencing in the workplace instead of holding on to them until, you have no other choice but to burn out or to quit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's an important point is, and it can go the opposite way for musicians. So, yeah, it's important to be an artist, but it's also important to be practical and know how to make a living. So you're not dumping everything into just being a creative, but you don't have any type of financial basis. So, yeah, be a musician because you love it and for art's sake, but also be smart, and
Mhm.
same thing for the other folks. Like, yeah, you go to be a doctor or a lawyer or in cyber security or whatever, but it's important that you have an artistic side to you too, to balance out that practicality side. So I think that that's what makes us human is we need to have both sides going all the time to achieve that almost balance. It's never going to be balanced, but almost balanced.
Yeah, well, balance for what works for you for sure. Yeah, I know that, in the periods of my life where I've had given more importance or priority to my hobbies or to things that allowed me to be routinely creative, that I actually was a lot more satisfied with my career as a musician, especially in those times where I was like basically in a different city every single week, like driving around, performing with a whole bunch of different orchestras, like being able to go on my weekend hikes, or being able to do an activity with my friends where we just, are creative, and or just like spending time with each other. It just really made the difference, because I look back at those times and I think I could not do that now. Like being so busy, or following the same kind of routine I had then, but it worked then. Maybe it worked better because I was focusing on other things, which, I don't know how many other musicians feel this way, but I know I'm a super perfectionist. So even in having a hobby, I feel like I have to be perfect at my hobby. I have to do it I have to be the best crocheter. I have to be the best baker. I have to be the best dog mom. And, it's definitely helped me work through that perfectionism. And that has in turn bled into my musicianship, that I'm okay with not chasing that impossible standard of perfection every single moment, and it doesn't allow the stress that goes along with that to build up either.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, totally, totally. Yes, it definitely helps when you're bad at something and you're a beginner again, and you realize that, even if your bread doesn't rise like it's supposed to, that the world's not going to end. And so it's okay if you miss a couple notes in a performance, or if your lesson doesn't go off as planned or whatever. So it definitely teaches resiliency as well as flexibility, not just,
Mhm.
making yourself say it has to be this way or it's not going to happen. But being flexible and being okay with it not being the way that you envisioned it being.
Yeah, totally. I know, so my mom is really big on crochet and sewing, and she really wanted me to be, but I just was not as good as her. And I had a different style, we'll say, than her. And so her teaching style was different than my learning style. I needed her to explain everything very thoroughly. And it was just something that came so naturally to her. So it was difficult for her to explain. And years later, as an adult and finding ways, creative outlets in my own life, I've come back to crocheting, and I am still not great. But sometimes I will literally just sit there and like do my rows and do my stitches, and I end up with, like what could be the great beginnings of a scarf. And then sometimes I'll just keep building on it. Sometimes I'll unravel it and start over. But it wasn't always this way, but it's kind of comforting to know that I don't have to be good at it. I don't
Hmm.
have to have a goal at the end of like, oh, I'm making a hat, I'm making a sweater, I'm making a blanket, it or whatever. Like I can literally just make it and it's just my own little thing, and it can turn into something. It can not turn into something. I could throw it away and like the world will keep spinning. You
Yeah.
know, I am still the person that I am. And so like find you a hobby that either you can enjoy being good at or you can enjoy being bad at too.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think that that's really important, and it's really fun, to learn from that, and it gives us that perspective, especially if you're a teacher, of what it is like to be a beginner, and that can make you a better and more creative teacher too, because you're learning from your own lived experience. That's what I do with everything, is like, I don't know, I'm always thinking about, how can I use this to make myself a better teacher, of course. And something creative that I did last year or 2 years ago, maybe, was I really wanted to make my downstairs patio, which is the entrance to the flute cave. I really wanted to make it magical for Christmas, so that when the kids come down for their lessons and it's dark, because like sun sets early, oh my gosh, it's killing me. That there was like a magical Christmassy thing in there. And so I decided on a Grinch theme. And I it was, Thanksgiving week probably, and I have a million things to do, and I was like, I could buy this Grinch tree for $100 with like the little droopy top, with the ornament on it, or I could make one. And so I was like, you know what, let's make one. And did it take forever? Yes. Did it make a mess? Yes. Does it look fabulous? Yes. Did I probably spend more than $100 on the supplies because I didn't realize actually how much garland I needed? Oh, yeah, probably did. But I just, I dropped everything and I just made my Grinch tree, and I'm proud of it. And it lives outside and it's magical and beautiful and perfect. So, sometimes it doesn't have to, sometimes it's important to just enjoy being okay with your house being a wreck and not caught up on anything, but just make your Grinch tree. Like, have fun, be magical for a minute.
Yeah. And I mean, your flute cave entrance, like that patio area, it is like perfect to create this little like winter wonderland and a little Grinchmas area. So yeah, I bet that's a lot of a great place to fuel some of those ideas that you have.
Oh yeah. I'm all about magic, right? And memory, creating memories. How can we create a memory? So
Mhm.
yes, it's fun.
Yeah, I remember, you know, a couple years ago, this was like around the beginning of the pandemic. Um, you know, that was a time for musicians where everything was just pulled out from under you, and the uncertainty of, you know, whether or not live performances were coming back, when they were coming back, all of that was pretty stressful. And that was in a time where I was gigging very, very often. I was traveling a lot, and all of a sudden it came to a halt, and I had to fill my time. I had to figure out what to do in the meantime, you know, aside from just practicing and hoping and crossing my fingers that these opportunities were going to come back. So I started focusing on baking. It was something that I was already a thing that I enjoyed doing, that I tended to do when I was really stressed, as a way to work out my anxiety and the things that I just didn't really know how to work through any other way. And so I started baking bread from scratch. I learned how to use a bread machine and work with yeast, which like terrified me because, you know, you hear about baking and how unpredictable it can be with bread, and like baking cakes from scratch. And now that's something that, you know, I still do when I'm stressed or when I have things that I feel like I need to work through. But it's also something that I lean on as something that I enjoy as time to to think through the things in my career, to think through, like, what am I doing now? Am I where I want to be? Am I happy with what the work that I'm doing? Is there something missing? Is there something that I can do, or an opportunity that I can create to fill in those gaps? And in the pandemic, that was with my friend Miles. He's a pianist, and we met in undergrad, and we were both kind of feeling the same way of like, well, what's going to happen, in the world and in our career. And we chose to create a flute piano duo and perform music that we felt really passionate about, rather than waiting for these opportunities to play music that we may enjoy, may just do for the paycheck. And that's something that has continued over the years as something that is a huge passion project of ours, that we, can connect, and we can be creative in that way. And that only came about because, we were looking for creative outlets, that we were looking for ways to work through the frustrations and the uncertainties that we had in our careers at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, my pandemic project was learning how to groom my dog so I could save $250 a month. And so I went ahead and invested in all the stuff, and I YouTube videoed all of the dog grooming things. And then that was a special time for us on Friday afternoons would be when we would go in the driveway and I would just groom him. And it would take a couple of hours because he's big and fluffy. But he loved it, and he loved being outside with me, having me all to himself. And I liked getting outside and, seeing result of work, which is always a relieving thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think musicians, we always take for granted that we work with our hands. And so when we're able to work with our hands in other ways, like dog grooming, baking, crocheting, sewing, it's really, it's something that I feel grateful for, because not everybody has the ability to do these things, or the time, or the finances. So find you something that kind of fits into your lifestyle, and can help you work through the things that, maybe you don't know how to work through right now. And maybe it opens up those creative channels in ways that are unexpected, right? I definitely feel more open to opportunities and more open to ideas that fall out of what I expect for my career, when I prioritize being creative and doing things that helps my mind not only close loops that feel like they've been open far too long, but also allow space to open loops that I hadn't even considered before.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think is if we're stay stuck in our routine and our regular thinking, then that shuts us off to new possibilities. So it's so important to be flexible in how you're thinking and be open to trying new things and even if they don't align with what your current goals are, because you never know what could happen.
Totally. Well, you've talked about dog grooming and making a Grinch Wonderland on your patio. What are some things that you do these days to help you with, like, being expressive or creative, or things that just kind of, fulfill that non-musical creative outlet for you?
Yeah, not too much beyond the holiday decor and the dog grooming. However, doing things these days as being a mom of a 15-month-old and mom of a senior dog and running my two little companies here, there's a lot in motion all the time. So something that I'm prioritizing with creativity that is related to work is I have all of these projects that have started but are not done. And I have all of those cooking all at the same time. So for the rest of the year, I'm going to be very, very conscious of moving things to completion instead of just, you know, chipping away at them a little bit at a time, because I feel that that really opens up so that I can be creative in other ways and not feel always like I have something I need to be doing for work. Aside from that, let me tell you, yesterday I cleaned out my pantry. It took 2.5 hours. I had the step stool. I had my little hand vacuum going. I was sweating. It was great. And I was able I was able to, use my creative brain to think about like, okay, how can we reorganize this in order to make it the most efficient possible so there's not crap on the floor? Because my husband, for some reason, loves putting stuff on the floor of the pantry, even though that there's space on the shelves. I'm like, no, I cannot handle that. Like, it needs to go on the shelf. So just being able to look at the thing, see the vision, execute the vision, and then have a clean pantry so that every time I walk in there, I'm not like, oh, this needs to go there, but I don't have time to deal with it right now. Plus, I feel like I need to clean everything before I can move it. So just
Mhm.
being able to do, household projects like that and feel like, yes, this is better. This frees me up. I'm excited about going into my pantry now.
Yeah, you're totally speaking my language because nothing frees up mental stress like being in a really clean or organized space for me. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I've been kind of recently, I've been really focused on like being a little bit more creative with my food prep, with my meal prep, like, trying to make sure that I'm getting the proper nutrition. I have to like be a little bit more creative about substituting certain ingredients, or it's like, oh, I really want to make this like super delicious recipe, but I like, how can I make this healthier? How can I make this more in line with what I know my body needs, while also fulfilling like what I just want because I want it.
Mm-hmm.
And something that has helped me with that is watching the British baking show.
Yes.
It's just, they're so creative and they're all amateur bakers. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
this totally speaks to exactly what we're talking about, that like, that's not their profession, but they are so creative and innovative, and like it makes me feel like I can make all the stuff even though I know I totally can't. But that's kind of how I have been, and now that the final is done, or
Yeah.
for this season.
You got to
um
start back over and watch them all again.
I mean, if that's what I have to do, I have to do
Yeah,
that,
that's what you
right?
have to
I'll
do.
have plenty
Yeah.
of time with with gig season, just, to listen to it, or, catch up on my downtime. So
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's okay to like be invested in a show, because that can
Mhm.
be that spurns your own creativity. I know for me, we always talk about how the world would be a better place if it were like the Great British Baking Show, especially the music world. Everyone's supportive of each
Mhm.
other and helping each other, and oh man, that's like the best. That's
Mhm.
the goal, is to create that type of a culture.
Yeah, find you an environment like the Great British Baking Show, and
Mhm.
yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with an environment like that.
Yeah. I don't think so either.
Well, yeah, I think that it's great to it's a great time to be a musician. It doesn't always feel that way, especially because there's a lot of things that are stressful. The dynamic of the music industry can be really discouraging at points, where you don't feel as supported or connected. Maybe you feel like you're a little bit more on your own kind of island, just doing the things that you do on a regular basis. So being able to find ways to be creative, to be expressive, whether it's on your own or whether it connects you with other people like you, other musicians, other people with similar interests. I think it's really important to prioritize that. And you may not be able to sit down and point out the very specific ways in which it helps you as a musician, but over time you can look back and see the changes, see how maybe you become more comfortable with being yourself, or you feel more encouraged and motivated to seek out the career that it is that you really want, rather than the career that everybody else has, or that you think that people think you should have. So I hope that this episode, this conversation has kind of struck some ideas for you, especially as you're going into gig season, where it's easy to just dig your head into the sand and just like, just get through it to the end of the month.
Yeah, absolutely. We use our creativity all the time. Sometimes that's in how to navigate traffic. We have to get creative with that. So
Yeah, for
and I think
sure.
it's important to, notice that whenever you are using your creative side.
hmm Yes. Well, we have some things that are cooking, this month, and looking forward to the year 2026. Because I don't know about you, but I'm ready for 2026.
Mhm.
I'm ready to
Mhm.
be done with 2025. Well, we've got some things in KE Creative Land that are cooking. We just, always want to be helpful and supportive. If you have any feedback about the podcast, or you have any ideas about what we should talk about in season 3, which is going to be starting pretty soon, then send us a message on Instagram, send us an email. You know how to reach us, and we'll put all of those links in the show notes description. So please don't be a stranger.
Yes.
All right. Well, we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
That's all for today's episode on The Limitless Musician. If you liked this episode, follow us on Instagram at The Limitless Musician to tell us what you want to hear next. Remember to subscribe to our newsletter to get exclusive content that won't show up anywhere else by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time.